and welcome to HiveScience, Strange Science. We got some stuff going on today, and I am excited about it. This is a newer article from science.org. What was it published? From April, so fairly recent. And it's going to shed some light on some very interesting topics that I hope my hive will enjoy. So this is because this is going to be relevant, and I'm hopefully going to use this as a resource to refer back to and defer young Earth creationists back to when they start discussing their 6,000-year-old world model. We're talking about marking time, radiocarbon timestamps left in ancient tree rings by cosmic ray bombardments can date historical events with unprecedented precision. 1,000 years ago, according to the Viking saga, that's not going to tell me the name of the saga. It's the Vinland saga, right? Oh, there it is, yeah. Intrepid seafarers sailed west from Greenland to the coast that they call Vinland. There they set up camps, harvested wild grapes, and skirmished with local people. At an archaeological site in a coastal town in Newfoundland called Lanceau Meadows, remnants of structures laid out like Viking longhouses and artifacts such as bronze cloaks, or such as a bronze cloak pin and iron nails record their presence. Likely the first Europeans to set foot in North America. Yet pinning down exactly when Vikings came to Vinland was impossible until researchers discovered a kind of cosmic timestamp preceding their arrival. In 2021, Margaret Cudem and Michael D. of the University of Groningen, I think that's Groningen, it might be Groningen, obtained pieces of timber from a longhouse with visible tree rings and intact bark. Cudems, an archaeologist, and D, a radiocarbon expert, were hoping to find a tree ring with an unusually large amount of carbon-14, the signature of a barrage of high-energy particles from outer space known to have occurred in 993 through 994 CE. It was a bit of a shot in the dark, Cudem said, but 28 rings from the bark, they found the telltale C14 spikes, persuasive evidence that Vikings felled the firs and juniper trees used in building the longhouse in 1021 CE. So they know the exact age now based on carbon dating. But no, carbon dating can't be used. It's not accurate. The time of the Viking foothold in Lanceau Meadow heralds a revolution in archaeology, a newfound ability to whittle the age of wooden artifacts from decades down to a single year. The breakthrough paving the way for such precision came in 2012 when Japanese physicist Fusa Miyake revealed that a massive influx of cosmic rays caused a big uptick in C14 in the tree rings dated from 774 to 775 CE. Since then, at least 7 more confirmed spikes, known as Miyake events, have been found so far. The earliest well-supported spike dates from 7,176 BCE. These chronological lighthouses are now guiding a growing cadre of scientists as they work to date ancient ruins, natural disasters, and other historic turning points in history. If we're able to start pinning things down to the year, D says, we can start analyzing early history, perhaps even prehistory, with the sort of rigor that previously we could only apply to modern history. The technique is phenomenally cool, says Charlotte Pearson, a dendrochronologist and radiocarbon scientist at the University of Arizona Laboratory of Tree Ring Research. These are eureka moments, and we're about to have a lot more of them. Even scribes in the early Middle Ages noticed the cosmic assault that produced Miyake events in 774 CE. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a collection of manuscripts that recount key moments in Anglo history, recorded the appearance in the sky after the sun of a red crucifix. Astronomers have speculated that the sighting may have been an atmospheric dust scattering light from nearby supernovas, or an especially vivid aurora borealis triggered by giant solar flares. The same year, thousands of kilometers to the east, as Japan's Emperor Conan, that's cool, Conan, struggled with a succession crisis in Japan, a cedar on Yaku Island off the nation's southeastern coast was sucking up carbon dioxide, CO2, through its short bristled needles. The tree converted some of the CO2 into sugar and deposited it in the outermost layer of its wood. As the empires rose and fell, the cedar added ring after ring of annual growth, succumbing only in 1956, at the vulnerable age of 1900 or so, to the blade of Yaku forestry manager. A half a century later, Miyake, then a graduate student at Nagoya University, cut a cross-section of the cedar stump. Each of its rings held a trace of carbon-14, radioactive isotope forms continuously in the upper atmosphere as cosmic rays. High-energy particles from space collide with gas molecules, spawning neutrons. When one of these neutrons knocks out a proton in a nitrogen atom, the nitrogen is transformed into carbon-14. As it inhaled CO2, the cedar had incorporated the carbon-14 into its wood. All the green plants take up carbon-14 and pass it on to the animals they sustain. It can be detected in fossils and other preserved tissue going back tens of thousands of years. The most predictable decay rate is the basis of standard radiocarbon dating, using methods such as mass spectrometry. Scientists can analyze organic remains, determine how much C14 has decayed since the life form that absorbed it died. That value is then compared against the carbon-14 value of items of known age, usually based on tree rings, giving the sample's age to within a few decades under ideal circumstances. Because the isotope has a half-life of about 5,700 years, samples from earlier than 50,000 years ago contain too little for dating. Yeah, and we know that about C14, right? That it's got that limit of 50,000 years. That's why when people bring it up and talking about dinosaurs, it's so weird to me, because what do dinosaurs have to do with C14 unless we're talking about avian dinosaurs, right? All right, so, sorry, I had to get a drink and clear my throat just a second. Okay, here's a diagram of how it kind of works. Cosmic carbon spikes, cosmic rays from solar flares or other extraterrestrial sources collide with gas molecules in our atmosphere, spawning neutrons. When a free neutron knocks a proton out of the nitrogen atom, it forms a radiocarbon. This is what we just read up there in the paragraph. So same thing we're just reading here. Let me catch up with my live chat here. Paul Camish, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. Glad you can make it. The Blitzkrieg isn't part of why. Oh, we're talking about still talking about World War II. That's fine. I'll just continue on. But Miyake wasn't trying to date the trees. She was looking for anomalous C-14 spikes left by violent space weather events, solar flares, other outbursts from the sun, and exploding stars that unleash short, exceptionally intense showers of high-energy particles. Using techniques developed in part by Lucas Wacker, a physicist at ETH Zurich, she zeroed in on a period towards the end of the 18th century where previous radiocarbon scientists had detected an anomalous hump. Working ring by ring, she sliced out tiny wood chips from the cedar and ran them through an accelerated mass spectrometer to determine the ratio of the carbon-14 to stable carbon isotopes. The ring corresponding to 774 to 775 CE, she saw a 12% jump in carbon-14 and increased 20 times larger than ordinary cosmic ray oscillations produce. Other teams confirmed the spike in samples from a German oak and New Zealand curry tree. Later that year, Miyake and her colleagues published a paper in Nature attributing C-14 spikes to massive bombardments of cosmic rays, perhaps from the sun or a gamma ray burst from a distant star. In 2013, they found a second, slightly smaller C-14 spike in the same Yaku cedar from 993 to 994 CE. Other scientists started calling the phenomena Miyake events. When Wacker read about Miyake's 774 to 75 CE and 993 to 94 CE spikes, he recognized that radiocarbon beacons untapped potential. He trained it on a chapel in Münster, Switzerland, supposedly built by the first Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne, on a site where he and his party had survived a horrendous blizzard. Another team of scientists had dated the chapel to 785 CE by meticulously analyzing the width of tree rings in the wooden beams. Wider rings often indicate wetter years. Then matching the patterns with more recent timber from the area until they had an unbroken record stretching from the present back to the beam. Yeah, and they have them marked out here, right? You got your rings. Wacker knew that if his team could find the C-14 spikes from the 774-75 CE Miyake event in the beams, they could simply count to its outer edge to obtain a precise date. They did just that, confirming in 2014 the 785 CE date. That was a pioneer work, Miyake says. I was really happy to see that kind of application was made possible because of our findings. While Wacker pursued the Holy Cross Chapel work, Dee and colleagues began exploring other ways that Miyake events might illuminate historical timelines confused or obscured by the passage of time. Reliable written records, chronicles listing the exact year of empires and wars, and more mundane archives and taxes, trade receipts, births and deaths go back only some 2,500 years, Dee says. And only in societies that kept written records. Radiocarbon dates, with their decades or centuries of uncertainty, may help construct history with broader strokes, but key historical moments often play out over shorter time scales. One couldn't examine the political events of the 20th century if you only had decadal resolution, Dee says. If the First World War and Second World War had been in the First World War and the Second World War had been in 1914 BC and 1939 BC, we wouldn't be able to tell those two events apart. In 2020, Hudums and Dee used the technique to clear a long-standing mystery surrounding rectangular ruins on a lake island in southern Siberia. Despite decades of archaeological work, nobody was for sure how old the Por-Bazhin site is, who built it, or what its purpose was. Por-Bazhin lacked any signs of occupation, such as trash heaps or charcoal from hearths, suggesting it was abandoned soon after construction. But in 774 to 75 CE, spike was present in an outer ring of the beam, indicating that the source of the tree had been fell in 777 CE. That was during the reign of Tigra-Bogu Quaghan, a Uyghur monarch who converted to Manchaeism, a religion that views existence as an epic struggle between good and evil. Most likely, Hudum says, Bogu Quaghan built Por-Bazhin as a Machian monastery. Por-Bazhin precise age points to the apparent reason it was never occupied in 779 CE. Rebels opposed to Manchaeism killed Bogu Quaghan, so that this whole building was finished. It immediately became useless. Dee also contributed to works by German colleagues that used the same Miyake spike to date another ancient fortress on the island in Lake Arazi in central Latvia. Latvia. These were questions that people couldn't answer for decades, and now we could with this method, Hudum says. In the wake of the headline-grabbing Vinland success, the Groningen team is tackling another alluring set of historical puzzles. Floating chronologies, or ancient, internally consistent timelines that are untethered to specific dates. For instance, Dee has long hoped to moor the floating timeline of ancient Egyptian pharaohs to our modern calendar. Radiocarbon dating has pegged the Egyptian chronology within a couple hundred years. Scientists have tried to use ancient observations of known astronomical events, such as stars and planet alignments, to narrow the dates down further, but the timeline remains blurry. Egypt's Old Kingdom era, for example, encompasses dozens of pharaohs who's reigned from approximately 2700 to 2200 BCE. The calendrical dates are not even really known to a century, Dee says. Many native Egyptian tree species don't produce annual growth rings, complicating the quest for Miyake events, but the Egyptians imported conifers, which builders often prefer for their straightness and strength, from Lebanon and Syria. The pandemic and law restrictions restricting the export of Egyptian artifacts have slowed the team's work, Dee says, but his sights set on discovering a precise date for the construction of the Great Pyramids, which was built by the Old Kingdom pharaoh Khufu. There is an old Arab proverb which goes, "Man fears time, time fears the pyramids." D says, if this structure and his reign could be precisely dated, it would solve a mystery that has endured since antiquity itself. Another floating chronology D's team hopes to anchor is the Mesoamerican long count timekeeping system used by the Maya, Aztec, and other Mesoamerican civilizations. This system counts the days linearly from a supposed day of the world's creation. While there have been several attempts to correlate the long count with the Gregorian calendar, academics are still debating the precise creation date. Finding a Miyake event in wood from Mesoamerican structures, such as a lintel in the Mayan temple Tikal in Guatemala, whose construction is recorded in the long count, would settle the matter. Miyake events also promise to date natural disasters that have altered the course of human history. This technique can answer questions about the rise and fall of civilization, Pearson says. In 2017, Clive Oppenheimer, a volcanologist at the University of Cambridge, teamed up with Wacker and others to use Miyake events to date a large tree buried in ash by the so-called Millennium eruption of Mount Pictou, a volcano straddling the border of China and North Korea. Radiocarbon dates peg the eruption, one of the biggest in the past 10,000 years, to sometime during the 9th to 11th century. Some historians hypothesize that the blast led to the fall in 926 CE of the Bohai Kingdom, which encompassed part of the Korean Peninsula, northeast China, and Russia's Far East. Oppenheimer and colleagues used the 774 to 775 CE Miyake event to date the large demise to 946 CE, exonerating the eruption in the kingdom's collapse. Thanks to the Miyake event, we could really nail it, Oppenheimer says. With anything that kills trees, earthquakes, fires, biological pests, there's now the potential to date the very, very precisely. All right. And here we got a little timetable of some of the stuff they've dated so far, just to get an idea of what we're working with here. This is freaking fascinating. Thank you for sticking with me. I know that this has been a long read, but hopefully it's worth sticking around for, because right now you're learning about a new aspect, a new tool available in carbon dating. So please, this is going to affect, like, if you like engaging in biblical literalism debates, young earth creation debates, things like that, this is going to be a important tool moving forward. We're just about done though. Pearson is hoping to replicate a version that is of that success in a tree that was downwind of the volcano Thera when it erupted around 3,500 years ago on the island of Santorini, possibly contributing to the fall of the Minoan civilization. The widespread devastation would have disrupted commerce throughout the Mediterranean and sent refugees scrambling for new homes. A C-14 spike centered on 1528 BCE, so far confirmed as a Miyake event, confirmed that in 1562 BCE, plus or minus 1 year, an abrupt chemical signal shows up in the tree rings, possibly caused by sulfate from the eruption. Miyake events may even shed light on potential future cataclysms. Dendrochronologist Brian Black, also at the Arizona tree ring lab recently used the 77475 CE Miyake event to date 2 mass tree deaths separated by more than 80 kilometers in the Puget Sound region of the U.S. Pacific Northwest. The forest grew along 2 distinct shallow faults near present-day Seattle, and geological evidence shows they died more than 1,000 years ago. Sediments record the upheaval, as do oral traditions of indigenous Salish people. Earth scientists have wondered whether both faults ruptured separately or at once in a single massive earthquake. Black found these trees all died during the same season, between 923 and 924 CE, suggesting the fault could conspire again to produce a massive earthquake. It takes the current worst case scenario of the shallow fault and raises it to the next level, he asserts. Radiocarbon scientists are now scouring tree ring archives for more Miyake events. Kyoto hopes to firm up one of the 6 millennium BCE, which may allow her to precisely date undisclosed Neolithic sites in Europe. Other researchers have spotted a possible Miyake cluster in 1261 CE, 1268 CE, and 1279 CE. Several different labs are aiming to verify these and other C14 spikes in trees from around the world. It's like sort of a jigsaw puzzle, Dee says. In the end, if we have enough spikes, we will be able to put together a lot of history in the Holocene in absolute time. There's Fusa Miyake right there with a tree ring. It's the one who these events are now named after. Ice core data can also confirm Miyake events. Cosmic rays spawn 2 other radioisotopes, beryllium-10 and chlorine-36, in the upper atmosphere. Rather than lodging in living tissue, these isotopes are washed to the surface in rain and snow, and they can end up in the annual layer of polar ice sheets like C14 and tree rings. Sharp spikes in beryllium-10 and chlorine-36 in the ice have been correlated to the known Miyake events. At a radiocarbon conference in Zurich last year, physicists Andrew Smith and David Fink of the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organization reported isotopic spikes at 774.75 CE and 993 and 94 CE in Antarctic cores. Continued analysis of the cores could reveal other previously unknown Miyake events that dendrochronologists could not follow up on. Miyake, too, is continuing her quest to find more of these events that bear her name. She has joined forces with the Arizona Laboratory of Tree Ring Research, whose 700,000 tree ring samples, the largest collection in the world, offer an unparalleled record of past climate and cosmic events. There, Miyake and her Arizona colleagues, along with colleagues around the world, are aiming to patch together from recently deceased and long dead trees a complete radiocarbon record stretching back 12,000 years. Filling in the gaps between Miyake events is also important, says Pearson, as they contain solar patterns that can be matched with tree rings and ice cores records to improve radiocarbon dating. Pearson and Wacker are preparing to submit another 11,000 years worth of data from California's bristlecone pines, which can live more than 4,000 years, to an internal radiocarbon calibration repository. Miyake is looking to samples of other long-lived trees from Russia, Finland, Japan, and has already spotted several yet unpublished Miyake events, she says. Miyake's pioneer pioneering analysis of the cedar continues to ripple through studies of the past, colleagues say. She trusted her instinct and was so confident in what she had that she was able to convince us all that there was a real effect, Dee says. And the rest, as they say, is history. This was written by Dennis Normile for Science.org. All right. That was a long read, so thank you so much for sticking with me as I plowed through that. I think that this was important knowledge to share and important science to share. Gives a new meaning to look at the trees. Absolutely. So thank you so much for sticking with me as I read through this document, this article, and shared a little bit about some new scientific discoveries and how we're pretty much slimming down all of history to the year at this point. So we're going to know when things happened. And that 6,000-year-old time frame those young Earth creationists like to throw around is going to find some struggle holding water. Thank you so much for sticking with me for this little science adventure. Please remember to be kind and take care. And we'll see you next time. All right.